on the camera? Who's your timer? Okay, don't forget to look at it. Please don't forget to look at the folks over on that side of the audience. Okay? They pay tuition too. A couple of you have not been doing a good job of communicating with them. So, all right, let's hear the story.
Okay, up next we have Chris Shandor. He's a junior in civil engineering, and he's here to talk to you about drinking water treatment.
Alright, well, to get started here, who here drinks water, just by a show of hands? Okay, who here would like to get watery diarrhea after drinking their water? Yeah, exactly. So basically in 1993 in Milwaukee, they had a breakout of cryptosporidium in their water drinking supply. And it turns out that they estimated that roughly 400,000 people got affected by this. And I mean, basically what happened is that the ice melted and it isolated all this cryptosporidium, and by the ice melting, it got into the waterways and basically polluted the entire system of water. So I'm here today to talk to you about drinking water treatment. Just a little overview, go over the history of drinking water treatment, some of the sources of drinking water, where it comes from, a quick treatment train to see how you develop your processes based upon how you get your water, and then a little bit about Madison's treatment facility. So history, in 1908 in New Jersey, actually New Jersey City, New Jersey, they adopted the first municipal drinking water treatment facility. And about a decade later, over tens of thousands of cities throughout the United States basically followed New Jersey's path and started creating their own. And as you can see here, they do a crude death rate for infectious diseases. And right around here, this is when they started doing municipal water supply. Right here is when they first used chlorine in the water to disinfect the water. And this huge peak right here is the influenza pandemic, but as you can see, it's a steady decrease. And I found from the EPA that throughout the world, they predict that 80% of diseases are directed strictly from polluted water. And then in 1964, they decided that if they add fluoride to the water, and they ran tests on this first before they actually adopted the scheme, that they could reduce tooth decay and improve dental health just out of the majority of the public, which is still a practice that's used today. And in 1974, the Safe Drinking Water Act was enacted by the EPA, which is basically just to keep regulating the water, make sure that it's always up to date, and they can basically ensure that everybody's testing their water regularly and it's going to be safe for citizens to drink. So then a few sources and quality measurements of how they tell whether the water is good enough for the citizens to be drinking. First off, you got groundwater versus surface water. This is where the two main water comes from that is into the water supply. Groundwater is just naturally cleaner. It gets filtered out by all the soil and all the rocks, and it leaks down into an aquifer, so you can just tell that it's going to be naturally cleaner. Surface water comes from the precipitation or the melting of mountains or snow on mountains and stuff. And just by traveling over the Earth's surface, it picks up particles and diseases and stuff, and it goes into the lakes or rivers, wherever they're going to draw their water from. So you're going to need a lot more treatment, for surface water over groundwater. And the two things that they pretty much classify water as is palatable versus potable. Palatable is that it's aesthetically pleasing, it doesn't have a taste or an odor to it. Potable is actually that it's safe to drink, it's free of disease, doesn't have any suspended solids in it. Turbidity is basically the most used thing that they use to determine if the water is clean or not. It's basically, can you shine a light through the water and see the light reflecting on the other side? There's three classes for turbidity: clear, cloudy, and muddy. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. pH level, just how acidic or basic the water is, and then biological testing is done just to see if there's any viruses, protozoa, bacteria, or amoebic cysts like the cryptosporidium in the water. Okay, so for the treatment train, you can take a look at your handout. It gives a pretty good, I guess, flow chart of how the water actually works, or how the water system actually works. And we'll go through each one of these treatment processes along the way as water travels through the municipal water supply. So coagulation, flocculation, it's a pretty simple process. Basically, all the particles that are in water are negatively charged. Well, not all of them, but for the most part, they're negatively charged. So what you do is you add in a coagulant, which would be in this flash mix here. And it's usually alum or ferric sulfate, which is aluminum or iron, which has a positive free charge, so you know that it'll be able to take away a lot of the negative charge in the water. And then they do a flash mix, it's just a really rapid mix of the water, so they know that it'll be dispersed immediately as soon as that coagulant's in. And then in the flocculation basin, they go from high speed to low speed. And the reason they go from high speed to low speed is at the high speed, they want to knock these particles together to make them bigger and bigger and bigger. And they keep going down in speed just to ensure that they don't knock the particles apart after they've already made them bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're ready to sink to the bottom. So then next, we go on to the sedimentation chamber. Sedimentation basins, this is an example of one right here. Basically, you have to make them big enough so that the effects of gravity can take hold for all these particles that are all lodged together and they can sink to the bottom. But it can't be short enough that the velocity of the water exceeds the acceleration due to gravity. So it's kind of, I mean, they have to make them bigger. This is why you see they have 3 of them back to back, because they have to take on a certain loading for how much water they need to supply to the city. So next we'll go to the filtration, which is immediately after sedimentation. And as you can see in the sedimentation, right here, the overflow of the water will leak down into there, and then it'll go into the filtration. And filtration, most of them today are mixed media. I mean, you can have single media, but they're just not as effective. Coal is used on top because it's basically activated carbon. And what you can do is, the activated carbon has it's a bigger pore space than sand, so it'll take up some of the bigger particles. But the carbon actually gets rid of some of the biological in it, just like, the Brita water bottles that they have today. They're filled with activated carbon, which takes away some of the, stuff that you wouldn't actually want in the water. And then sand has the smallest pore space, so it essentially filters out the smaller particles in the water. And basically what they do after filtration is they measure the turbidity of the water. And the standard is usually about 0.3 TU, which is pretty much crystal clear water. And they need to ensure that this happens at all times. If not, they have to backwash their filter, which is why they use the garnet at the bottom. Backwashing is just pushing water back up through it. They cut it off, and then when they push the water back up through it, you see all the particles and stuff that got trapped by these different medias. And they dispose of the water either in the wastewater treatment supply or into a landfill or wherever else they need to dispose of it. So then next is disinfection, probably the most important because it gets rid of the bacteria and viruses that are in the water. Chlorine is by far the most used throughout the United States. I mean, it's cheaper, it's effective, and it just gets the job done pretty well and has a long residual in it. You can use chlorine and it'll last longer than ozone. UV light is by far the most expensive, really energy intensive. I mean, they do it a few spots in Europe, but that's because they're just trying to save room on space and stuff. And then storage and distribution. It goes into a water tower, just like you see all throughout Madison. And the reason they put it in a water tower so that you can have a constant pressure head coming from the water tower. So that when you turn on your faucet, you're going to have a consistent pressure coming to it. And then a little bit about water treatment in Madison. It's a deep sandstone aquifer. Basically, they don't have to do any of the coagulation or flocculation or sedimentation. It's just add clean water. They add chlorine and fluoride to it. I mean, it's extremely hard. That's the only thing that we have wrong with Madison's water. But they do frequent testing almost on a daily basis to ensure that the citizens get what they want. And for more information, you can go to citymadison.com/water. And I appreciate the opportunity, and I'll be willing to answer any questions. Yes.
There have been reports that various kinds of hormones are getting into our water supply, and I was wondering if they have some way of removing testosterone, progesterone, whatever, estrogen, whatever might be getting into the water.
Okay, so the question is, and I'll paraphrase it a little bit, is that he heard that there is hormones coming into our water, and he's kind of wondering if there's specific ways that they can do to get rid of these hormones, ensure that the water's still safe for the society. To be honest, I haven't heard of any specific details of how they do that. I'm sure maybe hopefully that it get out in filtration. If not, disinfection would hopefully get rid of the byproducts of what could be happening with the hormones. But in particular, I haven't heard anything exactly on that. I can get you more information if you'd like.
Okay. Other
Any other
questions?
questions?
Okay, thank you.